November 12, 1964. Oakland, California. 8:47 p.m. A cold Pacific wind pressed against the narrow windows of a modest martial arts school on Broadway Street. Outside, traffic rolled in distant waves, headlights sliding across wet pavement. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed faintly above polished wooden floors still warm from hours of training. The air carried the scent of liniment oil, canvas mats, and old pine boards. A wall clock ticked with mechanical indifference. The school's sign bore a simple name, Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute. 7 men remained in the room that night. They were not spectators in the traditional sense. They were students, practitioners, witnesses by accident rather than invitation. They had stayed late to observe what had been described only as a private exchange. At the center of the room stood a man of modest height and lean build, 24 years old, black hair combed precisely, his breathing steady, his gaze untroubled. Bruce Lee. He wore plain black training trousers and a white t-shirt darkened slightly at the collar from exertion. His hands rested loosely at his sides, not clenched, not tense, waiting. Across from him, near the back wall beneath a faded calligraphy scroll, stood the challenger. The door had closed 20 minutes earlier. The room had grown quiet. Something inevitable was approaching. The ticking clock grew louder. Chapter 2. Ordinary Setting Immersion. The school had emptied gradually after the evening class. Wooden dummies stood motionless along the walls like silent sentries. A kettle in the corner still radiated faint warmth. A single overhead fan rotated slowly, pushing cool air across the room. One student leaned against a column, arms folded. Another sat cross-legged on the floor, hands resting on his knees. No one spoke above a whisper. The challenger's shoes pressed softly against the wood as he shifted his weight. He was broader, thicker through the shoulders. A practitioner of traditional Northern-style Kung Fu visiting from San Francisco. His uniform was immaculate, silk sleeves trimmed with dark piping. His presence filled the room before he ever spoke. Earlier that evening, his tone had been measured but unmistakably dismissive. "You teach non-Chinese students," he had said. "You change what should not be changed." Bruce had listened without interruption. His eyes neither hardened nor lowered. Oh, now the air between them carried the faint metallic scent of anticipation. Outside, a car backfired. No one in the room flinched. The challenger rolled his neck once, slowly. The silk fabric whispered with the movement. His fists clenched and relaxed. He was older, more established, supported by tradition and community. Bruce stood alone. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. Chapter 3. Antagonist, Introduction, and Philosophical Exchange. The challenger stepped forward, closing half the distance. He was at least 30 pounds heavier, his forearms thick with years of rigid conditioning. His voice remained low but firm. "You are too young to rewrite centuries," he said. Bruce's expression did not change. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost conversational. I do not rewrite," he replied. "I express." A faint scoff escaped the older man. "Strength comes from tradition." Bruce's eyes sharpened, though his posture remained fluid. "Strength comes from truth. What works is truth." The room seemed to shrink around them. One of the 7 witnesses later recalled that Bruce's breathing never altered, not once. The challenger raised his guard in a classical stance, deep-rooted, symmetrical, solid, structured, ancient. Bruce adopted no visible form at all. His hands hovered loosely in front of him, weight balanced but mobile, as though he were listening rather than preparing. The clock ticked to 9:03 p.m. No referee, no ceremony, no announcement, only intent. Chapter 4. Demonstration, Witness Reaction, and Legacy. The challenger moved first.
A sharp forward step, a powerful straight punch launched from the rear hand, hips turning with practiced authority. The strike cut through the air with conviction. It never landed. Bruce shifted, not backward, but slightly offline. A fraction of a step. His lead hand intercepted with minimal force, redirecting rather than blocking. In the same breath, his rear fist shot forward. Direct, vertical, efficient. The distance collapsed. The counter landed cleanly at the center line, driving through structure rather than against it. The older man staggered one step, surprise eclipsing anger. Before he could reset, Bruce advanced. 2 rapid straight punches, each economical, each precise. No wasted movement, no flourish. 4 seconds. That was all the witnesses would later agree upon. The challenger attempted to clinch, so to regain footing, but Bruce's footwork cut the angle again. A final low kick disrupted the base. Measured, controlled. The older man stumbled backward and caught himself against the wall. Silence. No shouting, no celebration. The fluorescent hum returned to prominence. The challenger's breathing was heavy now. Not injured, humbled, Bruce lowered his hands immediately. He did not pursue. He did not posture. He simply stepped back. After a long moment, the older man straightened his uniform. His voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "It is different," he admitted. Bruce bowed slightly, not triumphant, not mocking. "Different," he agreed, "because it must be alive." The 7 men in the room did not applaud. They stood in stillness, aware that something subtle yet irreversible had occurred. No cameras recorded the exchange. No newspapers reported it. There was no trophy, no official declaration, but word traveled. Through students, through conversations in dimly lit tea houses, through respectful nods between practitioners who had once doubted. Years later, some would say that night in Oakland marked a turning point, not only in a school, but in the philosophy that would later be called Jeet Kune Do. They would remember the quiet precision, the absence of anger, the swiftness that ended debate without cruelty. And those 7 men, when asked, would always pause before speaking, as though recalling something fragile and sacred, because what they witnessed was not merely a fight. It was the moment tradition met evolution and did not break. It adapted. The Junfan Gung Fu Institute had grown quieter with each passing minute after the evening class concluded. By 8:58 p.m., the usual rhythm of instruction had dissolved into a restrained stillness. The heavy canvas bags along the far wall swayed almost imperceptibly, disturbed by the lingering currents of air. Resin dust clung to the wooden floorboards where students had pivoted hours earlier. The faint aroma of tiger balm and perspiration remained suspended in the room, neither unpleasant nor sharp, simply honest. Fluorescent tubes overhead cast a pale, unwavering light that flattened shadows but could not dissolve the tension forming in the corners. The wall clock ticked in disciplined intervals, mechanical and detached from the human anticipation gathering beneath it. 7 men remained. They positioned themselves without instruction, one near the entrance, another seated against the mirrored wall, 2 standing shoulder to shoulder beside the wooden dummy. None crossed the center line of the room. None wished to intrude upon what was about to unfold. Outside, a delivery truck shifted gears along Broadway Street. Its engine faded into the distance. The world beyond the windows carried on, unaware that a philosophical reckoning was assembling in silence. Bruce Lee stood near the center of the floorboards. His posture was neither formal nor careless. His shoulders rested naturally. His breathing moved evenly through his ribs, invisible unless one watched closely. There was no ceremony in his stance, no theatrical readiness, only presence. Across from him, the visiting practitioner removed his outer jacket with deliberate precision and folded it over a chair. His movements were unhurried, almost ritualistic. The silk of his uniform caught the fluorescent light with a subdued sheen. His forearms bore the density of years spent striking wooden posts and stone surfaces. He surveyed the room once, acknowledging the witnesses, measuring the space, confirming the absence of distraction. A thin film of condensation traced the inside of the windows.
The night air outside had turned colder. Inside, warmth lingered just enough to make breath unnecessary, but tension unavoidable. The distance between the two men remained constant. No one cleared his throat. No one shifted loudly. The floorboards, old but sturdy, waited beneath them. It was not anger that filled the room.
It was conviction. And in that stillness, between the ticking clock and the hum of fluorescent light, the ordinary training hall transformed into something else entirely. A quiet arena, a chamber of proof. Antagonist. Introduction and philosophical exchange. At 9:02 p.m., the visiting practitioner stepped forward into the full wash of fluorescent light. He was in his early 30s, several years older than Bruce, his frame broader through the chest and shoulders. His forearms were corded with the density of long conditioning. A faint scar cut across his right knuckle, evidence of years spent striking surfaces that did not yield. He carried himself with the assurance of lineage behind him. His name was known within certain circles in San Francisco's Chinatown. He represented not merely himself, but a tradition guarded carefully for generations. To him, martial arts were inheritance, structured, preserved, and protected. He stopped 3 paces from Bruce. "You have made a spectacle of our art," he said evenly. "You teach openly. You change forms. You discard what has endured." His Cantonese was precise, deliberate, each word chosen. The 7 men along the walls felt the temperature in the room shift, though nothing physical had changed. Bruce did not respond immediately. His eyes remained steady, not defiant, not submissive, simply attentive. When he spoke, his voice carried no edge. "I do not discard," he said quietly. "I refine." A faint tightening moved across the older man's jaw. "Refinement requires authority," he replied. "Authority comes from history." Bruce shifted his weight subtly, and not retreating but aligning himself more squarely. His hands lifted slightly, not into a rigid guard but into a relaxed readiness. "History is valuable," Bruce answered, "but fighting is not history. It is now." The wall clock marked another second. The challenger's stance lowered into a traditional horse position before transitioning into a classical guard, elbows tucked, fists chambered with disciplined symmetry, his feet rooted firmly, as though anchoring into centuries of instruction. It was a stance designed for stability, for structure, for demonstration of foundation. Bruce adopted no formal posture. His lead hand hovered casually at chest height. His rear hand floated near his center line. His feet were light, heels barely kissing the wood. There was nothing ornamental in his alignment, no visible style. Only economy. "You believe structure is limitation," the older man said. "I believe limitation is structure," Bruce replied. The words settled heavily between them. One of the 7 witnesses would later recall that, in that instant, the room felt smaller than it was. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. The challenger inhaled deeply through his nose. His chest expanded with authority. Bruce exhaled once, slowly. At 9:04 p.m., without signal or announcement, the philosophical debate reached its inevitable conclusion. Not through argument, through demonstration. Demonstration, witness, reaction, and legacy. At 9:05 p.m., the silence fractured. The challenger advanced with decisive force. His lead foot struck the wood sharply. As he drove forward, hips rotating into a powerful straight punch aimed at Bruce's head. The technique was traditional, rooted, executed with conviction, born of years. It was fast. But Bruce was already gone from the line of attack. He did not retreat. He shifted, 6 inches to the outside. His lead hand intercepted the incoming arm not with a block, but with a subtle redirection, guiding the force past his shoulder rather than meeting it head-on. In the same breath, his right fist traveled forward along the center line. No chamber, no flourish. The strike landed cleanly against the sternum. A sharp exhale escaped the challenger's lungs. Before the larger man could re-establish structure,
Bruce stepped in, compressing distance. 2 vertical punches followed in seamless succession, compact, precise. Each delivered with mechanical efficiency. The sound was not explosive, but solid, controlled. 4 seconds. The challenger attempted to anchor his stance, lowering his weight to regain stability. Bruce adjusted instantly, his left foot angling inward as a low oblique kick disrupted the base of the front leg. Not destructive, decisive. The older man stumbled backward, catching himself against the wall beneath the calligraphy scroll. The room fell utterly silent. No one moved. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, indifferent witnesses to the exchange. The challenger's chest rose and fell heavily. His eyes, moments earlier sharp with certainty, now held something different. Not pain, but realization. Bruce had already stepped back, his hands lowered, his breathing unchanged. He did not pursue advantage. He did not speak. After several long seconds, the challenger straightened. He adjusted his sleeves with deliberate care, reclaiming composure piece by piece. When he finally looked at Bruce again, the arrogance had thinned. "You move without form," he said quietly. Bruce inclined his head slightly. "I move with what is necessary." No triumph entered his expression. No challenge followed. The 7 men along the walls remained still, absorbing what they had witnessed. There had been no spectacle, no dramatic exchange of dozens of blows, only clarity, swift and undeniable. In that modest Oakland school, beneath unremarkable fluorescent light, a philosophical argument had been resolved not through domination, but through proof. Word of the encounter did not travel through newspapers. There were no official records. It passed instead through measured voices and careful retellings, shared between practitioners in back rooms, in quiet conversations, after training sessions, in respectful tones that carried weight. Some would later say that night marked the quiet crystallization of an idea that would come to be known as Jeet Kune Do, a rejection of rigidity, an embrace of directness. But those 7 men remembered something simpler. They remembered the stillness before movement. They remembered the 4 seconds that dissolved certainty. And they remembered that the most dangerous force in that room had not been anger or strength. It had been clarity.